All right, so what we're doing is this is a story which is based on the ticket that we had, but it's not the same. So this story is in a small town. There is an annual contest called the Pangram Contest. Participants are required to submit a sentence that is a pangram. Pause. What is that? That is a sentence or phrase that somehow includes every letter of the English alphabet. That's A through Z. If it doesn't have all the letters, then it's not a pangram. So the organizers want to automate the process of verifying entries to determine whether they are valid programs or not. Wait, is this recording? So I don't have to do it twice. It
Yes,
is.
it's
Okay.
Yeah,
recording.
I started it.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
It is. Are you
Um.
going to show your screen now?
Oh yeah. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes. No, I
Okay.
cannot.
Yes, there.
Okay. Are you on your phone,
Oh,
Esau?
no, I'm not. I'm gonna leave and come right back.
Okay.
Please pause. I'm coming right back because I cannot see your screen. Okay?
Okay. All right. We're gonna keep going anyway.
I'm back.
All right.
Awesomeness. I see it.
All right. Perfect. All
Carry
right.
on.
So that's a pangram. It has to include every letter of the alphabet. If it doesn't have one letter included, like it's missing an S or something, then it's not a pangram. So the organizers want to automate the process of verifying entries to determine whether they are valid pangrams or not. Write a program that takes an input sentence and determines if it qualifies as a pangram contest for the pangram contest. All right. So we can do this all with a function, and here's the solution I have here. I'm going to go through it, and as I explain how it works, you're going to understand that there are other ways that you could possibly approach this, but I'm going to show why this makes sense. So the first thing we do, we define a function. I'm calling mine pangram check, parentheses for the input. I'm just going to name this variable input, and I'm going to just say the type is string. I could delete this because it's going to be treated as a string below, so it would still run, but I'm going to put this here because it's good practice. Next, outside the parentheses, I'm going to designate what I want the return data type to be, and I should be getting back a Boolean. This is static type checking, so by doing this, I'm giving the language an opportunity to check for errors before, during while it's compiling. If I don't do that, it can't do it. Anyways, so now I open the code block with this bracket, and the first thing I like to do, actually, and I always do this on this line before, I like to push all my strings to lowercase. Oops. Get rid of my indent. So let input lowercase is going to be what I'm calling this second string, and because it's a string, I have access to string functions by calling the variable name, and if it's a string, when I put dot, I now have all these functions that apply to strings. I have search, slice, split, a bunch that I haven't used before, but some I've definitely used, like 2 lowercase or 2 uppercase. In this case, I'm going to go with 2 lowercase because I want to force whatever somebody enters into a lowercase character set so that I only have to check against lowercase a through z. I don't want to have 2 sets of a through z here. So, and that's the case in a lot of functions that I do. So that's why that's something that I like to reflexively do. The next line is I'm declaring a string, and I'm putting all the letters of the alphabet into this string. So this is going to be the thing that I'm using to check. Now the reason I have to have this string here for the input is I can't change the input. If I call this input anywhere else, whatever they put in the beginning is always going to be the input. Down here, I think it's going to be, let's say they put in Tuesday. it would always be Tuesday, Tuesday. Even if I did some stuff down here and put Tuesday, Tuesday, I concatenate maybe another word inside of it. Every time I call the input any other place in the function, that input was always the same. So that's why I have to have another string to transport that into so that I can change it. And when I call it, it'll have whatever changes I put in here. So the only change I want to make to it is I'm going to put this string into here, and I'm going to make this lowercase. And so whenever I mess with it, it's always the lowercase version of whatever the input was. So let's get down to how we check to see if whatever sentence has all the letters of the alphabet. When I go here, I'm using a for loop because I do know that I want to check for every letter. That means I know exactly how many times I want to loop because there are 26 letters in the alphabet, so I know exactly how many iterations I want. That's why it's a for loop. So for, and then we use the traditional for loop structure. That is, let I equal 0. I is going to be the counting number. We're going to start it off at 0. We go to the next part, I less than alphabet. Let's remember, alphabet is the second string value that I declared in here. And it is all of the letters of the alphabet. So I have two options for how many iterations. I can either...
Can I ask a question really quick?
Sure.
What would happen, like, I didn't declare, like, I didn't use that lowercase. I mean, what would happen if you didn't use that?
So
if you didn't declare that.
Yeah, so if I did not use that, I can't basically expect an accurate result based on A through Z being lowercase. If I didn't use this, what I would want to have is a second set of characters here, and they would all be the uppercase version. So then I would need to make sure, okay, does whatever they're entering have every letter, whether it's lowercase or uppercase? And depending on how I'm going about doing that, I may use a different variable. I may go about that in other ways. But to simplify things, I only want to deal with one case situation, and that's lowercase. So I'm going to automatically force, no matter what they use, into lowercase, because it really doesn't matter. If the first letter of the first word of their string is capital or lowercase a, it's still A. So why not just simplify the code to make it forced to lowercase? That way we can check against these and know, okay, there were no A's no matter what, capital or lowercase, because they all went to lowercase. But it's hard to say what would happen because depending on how people implement their code, maybe it still works because they accounted for it, but maybe they just get a result that they don't expect. So it runs, but you just don't get the accurate result. But now we need to figure out how we're going to loop through and check all the alphabet strings against what they put in. And that's what the for loop is for. So because I know there's 26 letters in the alphabet, I could have just wrote 26. So I is less than 26. But what if I decided to remove L for whatever reason? Then it's not 26, it's 25. But I have to go down here and put 25. I don't want to have to change it if I want to change this anywhere. So I'm just going to put the reference to it, which is alphabet. And whatever this alphabet is, it's a string. So now I can use dot. And now I have access to all the string functions. And look, there's one called length. What that means is however long the string is going to be equal to the length. However many characters there are in this string, that's how long the string is. That means it's going to be equal to 26. And if I were to change it, it would automatically switch. So it's better to use a reference to this string and use the length string function to call the number rather than write this number. Because if that number is not right, I have to go back here and change it each time. So on the first iteration, I'm going to increment I from 0 to 1. But we are going to start with 0. And what happens is we go to this code block, and the first thing it does, we declare letter to be a string, and it's going to just be a single letter because we're going to use equal to, or we're going to set the value to alphabet. And even though alphabet is a string, we can treat it like an array. This is something you can do in TypeScript. So what I do is alphabet, bracket, and then we know that the index of the array, in other words, the numbered placeholder, is going to be the number that goes inside the bracket. So if I wanted element 2, I would put in 2 because that's index 2. If I wanted the first one in there, I would put 0 because elements start numbered 0 and then they count up. That's the reason I'm starting my counting number at 0 here as well. So 0 is equal to letter A, 1 equal to letter B, C equal to number 2, and so on. That's how I know every time we iterate, it increments and it moves up the alphabet. And what happens is the number I is increasing, but it's only representing an index here or a letter here, because a letter is what's holding a place in all 26 of the list here. When I get to 26, I'm done. But keep this in mind. This loop, this code block is open, so it doesn't end right here. We go to this step. There's an if statement. I want to know, does the input have each letter of the alphabet, right? So what I am doing is setting the letter of the alphabet to letter here, but now I go down here and I say lowercase input is basically just the input forced to lowercase, so it's just the input. Does the input include this letter? Okay. Then I have an operator in front of that to say, does it not include this letter? Why am I asking, does it not include one of the letters of the alphabet? It's because that's the simplest way to determine if something is a pangram. If it lacks any one of these, it is not a pangram. And I can stop doing this function and just go on out. So that's why if the input lowercase string, which is the input string, if it does not include any one of these letters, whether it's the first one, the middle one, or the last one, then I execute this code, return false, meaning not a pangram. We don't got to go through the rest of the numbers. It just ends the loop. Now, that's how this works, is we're relying on knowing if any of these letters are not included to know if it is a pangram. Now, if we loop all the way through and it's like, yep, it's included, it's included, it's included, well, as a default, this function is going to return true because it's only going to fail if it's not a pangram, if it lacks any of the letters. And that's how this function works, by relying on knowing if something is not a pangram to define whether it is a pangram. The last part of this program is simply calling the function and allowing someone to input a sentence and then showing whether it's a pangram or not. So there's a couple things taking place on these last two lines. The first thing is I need a string to basically check at the end. So I'm going to say let result equal, or sorry, this is going to not be a string. This is going to be a Boolean. Let result equals, because result is either going to be true or false. Basically, we evaluate the function. So we call the function pangram check. All right. Now, I can only put a string inside a pangram check, right? Because it input and it's a string format, right? Now, what I'm going to do is nest a function inside of this. I'm going to call prompt. And the prompt is going to say to the user, enter a sentence, right? Whatever they enter will go into the pangram. So these don't have to be separate lines. And the reason that works is because whatever they enter is going to be a string format as well. Even if it turned out to be a number or something else, it would be a string. So that's why you can call this prompt function. It feeds back into the pangram function. I have two functions. Every function comes with its own parentheses set. So I got the yellow ones here for the pangrams. And since I'm inside of that, I'm calling prompt function, and it has its parentheses. These are the pink ones. And so I'm making sure I've got one set of parentheses for every function. This is 1, 2, I got 2 functions. This makes sense. All of this evaluates to set this value to either true or false. Last, I need to say this is a pangram or not. So I take the result and I alert and I go result. This here is a ternary operator. So basically, I'm just asking the question, is it A or B? Is it true or false? And I have these two options. It's just like an if statement. Result, and you can do this with Booleans because it's true or false. Result, and then this is a pangram if true, colon, the second option, not a pangram if false. Now comes the part where we test it. All right, so we call the function. I'm getting the prompt, so we're right here at this point. Blah, blah, blah. I pass it through, not a pangram. Okay, here's a classic pangram. Everyone uses this to learn what a pangram is. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Now, if this function's right, it should say that this is a pangram.
It's the quick brown fox jumps over a lazy dog.
How dare you? How dare you, Brian? I'm going to do it anyway. This is a pangram. My function has succeeded.
Wait, why did that? Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
I forgot there's an A in lazy.
Yeah, there's still an A in lazy. Over a lazy dog. Either one works. Both are pangrams. See?
Hey, TJ, I have a question.
Shoot.
Yeah? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
So, I guess I'm getting hung. So, in the beginning, the function pangram check has a parameter input string, right?
Mm-hmm.
But down at the bottom, why does it change to prompt? I mean, it's like you've already put a parameter there. Why are you putting a new parameter down at the bottom for prompt?
Oh, so this is actually inputting into this parameter input. All I'm saying is my input for this is going to equal the user's input for this function. And the reason that I can just plug it in and it works there is because this is going to return a string, and this only accepts a string.
But don't you have to convert to string the prompt? The prompt statement on line number 21.
Say again?
Don't you have to convert to string? So in front of prompt, you need this. You don't need the string function to convert.
Oh, you mean like how it says message?
Right. No, not the message. I mean, don't you need like the string to convert function to convert whatever the user enter?
Oh, do I need to convert it?
Mm-hmm.
No, because the built-in, the prompt function only returns a string. So if I prompted somebody for a number, for example, if I were doing another function and I use prompt and I say enter number, if they enter that number, it's not going to return number. It's going to return string data type. So in that case, it would be converted.
Number.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you put prompt enter sentence in the beginning instead of? Because I mean, you're basically doing the same thing, right? Like
you could create a variable up top and do that as well.
I mean, like right in the so you put pangram check, you put prompt enter sentence right there instead of like doing it at the bottom, right?
Aaron, what was that question?
Right out the gate, right? You type function pangram check, and then where it says input string, couldn't you just have prompt enter a sentence there? Since it seems like you're doing two things, one in the beginning, one at the end. You know what I mean?
I cannot, because this here, the program sees it, the computer sees it, but the user doesn't see this.
So I think what I would say is like the thing is he has under for like pulling the information where he gets the prompt initially, I would probably put prompt on the outside of the function.
Oh, like if we did.
Yeah.
So you might
but like it's doing the same thing because you have one inside the other.
Yeah, so like what you could do.
Essentially what it does.
Do prompt.
And then pangrams check in the inside.
Well, just because I know some people are thinking kind of linear like this, like we do when we do this in pseudocode, we do one thing per line, right? So when I prompt a user, I would want to accept that as the value of something else. So let's say I might say user input. And remember, in pseudocode, you can be like prompt user for input, and then in the next line, accept that as and store that in the value of whatever. In TypeScript, we can just put set, which is equal. And so I'm saying both give me your input and set it to this value at one time. If I can do that, why can't I also do give me your input and set it to the input of this function at the same time, and whatever it turns out to be, set that to the value of result, which is going to be a Boolean. There's no reason you can't do that. And if you're thinking right now, okay, well, how far does the rabbit hole go? Can I do function within a function within a function? Like, can I go 5 functions in? Sure, you can. Not recommended, though. Not very readable, easy to misunderstand, can get buggy. So you want your stuff to be as simple as possible. Because if I have a bunch of code and something doesn't work, I have a lot of stuff to check. So you want to have, or I find it better to do things in as few lines as possible and try to keep it as straightforward and as simple as possible. But understand that what works on this line could possibly work, and what works in 2 lines could possibly work in 1 line as well. So I've gotten pretty used to doing this.
When you put prompt and then enter a sentence in that parentheses with the function, is that basically tying that to the whatever you put in the beginning, the input string?
Yes, because remember, all I'm doing here is defining the function. I'm not running it. The user doesn't see it. I'm just telling the computer, be ready to do this when it's called. Here is when the program actually starts for the user. I give them the prompt and put a sentence. In this case, I want to do 2 or 3 things at once, but I don't need to let the user know that. I just want them to enter a prompt. When they enter that, it goes right into this function as a string, and then the result of this function, which runs just off of this call, goes right into the result here. So I'm setting the value of result with the outcome of this function here. So I've linked all 3 of these.
Okay.
You could even take it a step further and put that whole pangram check call inside of the alert where it says result.
Ew.
Yeah. So like if you wanted to compress it even more, it still does the exact same thing because they work from the inside out. So it'll go through that, enter the sentence, reading the sentence, and then, give you a result based on that. I mean, if you look at it literally, it's the same thing because you're saying let result equal all of this, and in the next line you're calling result, which is just all of that, right? I mean, obviously you've already stored the data at this point, but I just tried it out on my own, and yeah, same exact functionality. It's just
nice.
1 line, but a lot more confusing to read.
Unless you're used to it. So in order to get used to this, what I've been doing is I would go ahead, erase that, do it from scratch. If I can do it without an error, then I've got it. If I get an error, I erase it, Do it from scratch. You do this until things start to rub off on you. You do this until you look at this line and you realize, okay, the purpose of this is I can never change this. The input is the input. Every time I reference the input, it's going to be exactly how they put it in. So if I want the benefit of everything being in lowercase, I have to basically use this input to set this string, and that becomes my input because I now have control over it. So every time I call this, it's going to be lowercase. That's why this line is here. Every line of this function serves a specific purpose. Why do I have this
So
string?
the
To
reason
check
you
all
put
these.
the parameter there, the input string, is that like so you can manipulate it throughout the code?
So it's just good practice to declare the data type of an input inside of the parentheses. What the code is able to do if you do that is do static type checking. It will run even if you don't have this, right? This is called dynamic. So if I don't have this, but I'm still using it as a string, the code's going to recognize it as a string. So I can still put something in.
I thought it's required. Okay.
Yeah. So there's this thing in TypeScript called dynamic and static type checking. If it's dynamic, it means I haven't declared what data type it is because maybe I haven't decided, you know? But if I
guess what I was asking was like that input string in there, that's being subject to whatever you decide to do with it in the code. Does that make sense? Like it's like a placeholder.
Yeah, it
Oh,
is.
I thought it was more like a variable. Like that's naming that variable. Like you've named the variable, the string variable input. Like it could be A there. You know,
You're right.
that's what I thought it was.
I
That's
also
exactly what
have
it
a
is.
comment in the chat that kind of goes along with those comments.
Okay, go ahead. Oh yeah, before you read that, let me actually let me just say, yeah, these parameters, aka inputs, aka function variables, are for all intents and purposes variables. However, these exist within the context of the function, right? So what I mean by that, if I went outside this function and called this variable and I said, you know, input equals, so I want to set it to whatever. This isn't going to work because I never declared this outside the function. It only exists inside of this function. This function might not even be.
Well.
This is just like a piece of code that I can kind of put anywhere and call anywhere. It may not even be in this part of the program. I may just be relying on a library that has the function and I call the function like that. So if I want something,
input lowercase and alphabet as well wouldn't work
Correct.
because it's inside the function.
Yeah,
Yep.
true. That's true.
It's called
But
scope.
yeah, there you go. And that's why we got to pay attention to these brackets because this tells me this is where the function's code begins. This is where it ends.
Hey,
This
a
is-
quick. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your statement. I just wanted to expand on the scope thing real quick because there's a good example right in front of us.
Oh, sure. Just want to finish saying, and this is where the loops code function begins, and this is where it ends. This is where this loops code function begins. This is where it ends. You just have to know what's the scope of each part of the code. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's basically what I was saying. Is right there, line 11. You say let letter equals alphabet. As soon as you're out of that for loop, that does not exist anymore. So you can still be in the function, but you cannot reference letter unless you're inside that for loop.
Right, which is why it was important to say, remember, this loop doesn't end here because there's no bracket. The bracket for this loop begins here, but it ends here. So as long as I'm within these purples, I can call letter, I can call input, I can reference whatever exists within the scope of what I'm doing. So that's why you got to pay attention to what these brackets are defining as the scope, because that's what they basically define. Here's the scope of the function. Here's the scope of this loop. And here's the scope of this if statement. So be aware of that.
And in the same token, when you're declaring the function pangram check, that variable input is a string and the result will be a Boolean.
That is correct. All right. Was there a question in that chat that somebody said?
I think Giselle or Aaron.
Okay. While we do that, let me basically.
Yeah, can you just read it? 'Cause that's
That was a good example though, TJ. Good job.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was gonna get another story for the task 2. Give me 1 second. Let me find that ticket real quick. Stay out my emails. Let's see. Yeah, and I'm going to show you what I do for, like, we're not technically supposed to work on work tickets outside of work hours or whatever, but we need to still learn. So that's an opportunity for us to take the story and let me see here.
Hey TJ.
Yeah.
So I see that most people, or at least one or two, are having the issue with kind of like, I guess, knowing, obviously every problem is different. What would be in the function would be different case by case, but possibly maybe going through describing the parts of the function and then the parts within it. I think maybe more or less, instead of focusing on the problem, maybe focusing on how to approach it after, let's say, you have your pseudocode and how the function kind of breaks down and stuff. Because the common thing that I'm seeing, being brought up is just how to approach the problem or how to come up from it from scratch.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So like problem analysis, right?
Right.
So there's 2 parts of that. The first part is when we read the story, I think we need to be looking for certain keywords, right? I do have a little chart here, and this is my example, but you guys can make your own, and actually you can access this in our study group. But like when I start seeing words like store, assign, hold, memory, I'm thinking variables are the constructs I'm going to need. If I start seeing things like check, compare, whether, evaluate, it could be an if statement. When I see case, in case this happens, in case somebody doesn't show up for work, in case you get into an accident, and I'm looking at the story and it has cases and stuff I'm starting to think switch statements. So we do have to get better at recognizing certain keywords and indicators that give me a list of options that I'm going to need. In the case of this pangram thing, it's more or less what a pangram is that kind of suggests to you what you need to do. Because what it is simply a phrase or a sentence that has every letter of the alphabet. Now you can look within the description of what a pangram is and still look for like indicators, like it has to have everything, right? I forgot which one has everything. The grayed out ones, by the way, are ones that we have not covered in RTI or in work. So if you do see these grayed out ones, just know that they exist as constructs. There are things like lists and dictionaries in TypeScript. It's just we haven't done recursion. We haven't done classes and objects yet. But we have done loops. We have done arrays. We've done exception handling, and we've done functions. But just know macros exist. They're out there, and they have specific purposes. But for the pangram thing, it was a little bit more intuitive because what you need to do came more from this here than really any of this other stuff. The other stuff was a little bit just storytelling.
And that's when Google comes in and you just look up what a pangram is. And so after knowing what a pangram is, you know that it needs some type of unique values, so on and so forth.
Yeah,
And
a lot of
there
this
you go.
stuff definitely, we are going to have to
Research.
do some research to find
Yes,
out,
but
like,
still,
what is
it was
a
very
this.
like frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating. I think it's designed that way because we're being given a problem and it has to be something that we're maybe not familiar with. But the problem isn't, learning how to code that problem. It's learning how to approach that problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, when they say like check to see if something is a pangram, what it really means is, all right, you have a string and you're going to go ahead and you need to look at stuff that's going to evaluate a string and its values. So specifically, like the pangram itself is just something that they can build a problem around. But it's not really what the problem is. If you get my
See,
what I'm saying.
I wouldn't automatically like make that inference to declare that lowercase variable to check against the fun. I wouldn't have done that. I mean, I didn't.
I believe you would have eventually, given enough time,
You don't
because
have to,
you don't have
but it's a
to.
lot easier.
Yes. It's a little bit like the day of the week function that we had to write to. And it's like, okay, well, what if they put day of the week in all caps? Or what if they use the first three letters or whatever? If you're using a switch, you would want to have a case for every single situation. I would have a case for lowercase. I would have a case for uppercase. I would have a case for whether they use the first abbreviation of the day of the week. But if I want to simplify that,
I guess like also like analytically thinking, it's like thinking outside of the box. But I don't even know where the box is right now. Like I don't even know where the box. Like am I in the box? I don't even know if I'm in the box.
Like the only way that I figured out that I needed to use lowercase was because I ended up researching a bunch of stuff and figured out that there are inbuilt functions inside of IntelliJ. And so going through some of that, that's when I found out, oh, well, that's what some of these other ones mean. And then from there, that's how I got to the input. I mean,
But at the same time, we were
Candace,
advised
it's
like
not
not to
just to
do
clarify.
outside resources to like, so that's why that disconnect for me is also there. It's like, so when do we seek like those outside resources to actually help us get understanding and moving along, because that is lacking, obviously.
Yeah. It's also research though on your own
in
end.
what they're teaching us.
No, you're right. Let me list.
It's also research on our own end, and then Candace also. It's not IntelliJ, it's TypeScript. So those built-in functions are TypeScript. It's not just the IDE on its own.
Well, I mean, yeah, I understand that because there's inbuilt stuff in Java and all that other stuff too.
Yeah,
I understand
I just wanted to clarify.
But I had to go back and figure out. Oh, okay, wait a minute. Because like, of course, TypeScript is different than JavaScript. It's slightly different or whatever from JavaScript, so you can't really write something. Well, I guess it's just more specific or something. I don't know. But all of that is still just research and just happening upon that, and that's that ends up taking an hour and a half, for your ticket for the first test.
I know that TJ, when he was doing this problem earlier on the Discord or whatever, for example, two lowercase, I think. No, includes. I think dot includes. TJ, you did a good job at explaining before that, like IntelliJ, or it would, well, I guess more in IntelliJ than on Playground, but it would kind of tell you, list out dot, and then it'll list out all the things, all the built-in functions that will possibly work with a string type or with a so on and so forth. So you could
Right.
use that also to kind of like, hey, I don't know all of them, but which one may apply to what I'm going about, and it really just comes down to how you approach the problem at the end. Yeah, see.
So like, yeah, if you have declared a variable's type, now you can look up what kind of built-in functions exists in that variable's type. So like here, I already have declared this as a string. So if I want to know, okay, what can I do with this string? I would start typing input, which is the string's name. I press dot, and it does it here in TypeScript Playground 2, but now it's giving me a list of these are some built-in functions that you could use.
Well,
And
see,
now,
here's the problem though. Like, I can research all day about built-in functions and what they do, but I have no idea. Like, if I were to take another problem, I still would not know how to put it together. You know what I mean? So like, I know how to do functions. I know how to do for loops. I know how to do, I understand. Yeah, like the dot, the dot notation, and you can assign built-in functions to the variables. Like I get that, but it's like when I'm trying to solve a problem, I have all these pieces, but I don't know where they fit.
that's a good point. So, in other words, sometimes you're going to know what you wish the thing could do. Like what I wish I could do with an array or a function is, it'd be really nice to just have a function that's like easily searches it or like quickly tells me how long it is. That's a time for you to use your research in that way. I know you guys know how to research, and what you're saying is, how would I even know to look for something like that? It comes from, what do I wish this thing could do? I wish it could concatenate, or I wish it could add, or I wish it could remove, or something like that. And that's when you look for that thing. So you would go array, removal methods, or something like that. I believe the fastest thing to do is to go to AI like ChatGPT or Google Bard and simply ask, is there an easy way to get the last item of an array? And so you can get the same information as you would spend longer looking for that. But the thing is, some of us don't really know how to research coding stuff, so we might end up on whatever website, Stack Overflow, whatever. We might confuse a commenter's solution for a correct answer, and it may or may not be right. So in a lot of cases, I would suggest know what you want to know and ask it to an AI. And then ask follow-up questions, because this is something that you can go, okay, could I also solve it mostly with an array? Question. Yes, you can. And it's going to give me an example. Here's an alternative solution. It's going to show me what that looks like, and I'm going to see some stuff that I don't know yet, right? But then it's going to go through the process of breaking down and explaining the parts. We can't exactly. We can't really know to ask for every function that exists, because there are a lot of functions available for a lot of different variable types. But just the process of, you can, but like just the process of solving some of these, you will start to pick up things like, hey, I know I use linked here, but like, what else could I do? Like, what else is available? And you'll start to see, oh, I could use this other thing on this list, like splice or whatever. It just didn't apply to the thing I was doing at the time, but now I see that it's useful. So this is something that's going to come to everyone over time. but you've
So
got to
TJ,
code every day.
can I make a recommendation? I guess I don't know how much time we got left on this RTI, but this is a very useful recording here.
35 minutes.
My bad, Kelvin.
Yep.
Let me just say this, and then my bad, Kelvin. I'm on the phone right now. I didn't see your hand up. Possibly maybe taking the rest of the time, or maybe a study group session, which I know you do, and dedicating it to just kind of best practices on study methods. Or not study methods, but exactly what you just explained. I think that'll be a valuable lesson.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. What I was trying to do here when after the stage gate was I want to analyze what we struggle with. And a lot of what I heard was people ended up spending a lot of time on problems. So that's time management. That's okay. We can teach each other time management tips and skills, right? Some of us got stuck because we went in order and we got to number 2. That took me a long time. It took a lot of us with experience a long time. But I also read ahead. So I ended up doing number 2 last. I did the easy ones first. That's a time management skill. That's something we can easily teach you guys. Also, doing the pseudocode for things ahead of time will kind of give you, before you start doing TypeScript, will give you an idea of how complicated your TypeScript solution may or may not be. In the case of the stage gate, they were going to give us extra credit for it, so it would have made sense for everyone to do pseudocode for every last problem, no matter what. That also helps them determine if, let's say, you do the pseudocode and your code is wrong. Well, they can look at the pseudocode and be like, okay, well, they knew what they wanted to do. They were trying to do it. They just made a syntax error. So it's not the case that if the solution didn't work, you got it completely wrong, because they got something to work with. They understand where you went wrong. So we need to do that in terms of being able to know, all right, this is going to be a complicated thing or not. And that could save us time. Research methods. So look, Google if you have to.
Yes, because we need to start with the pseudocode. That was what my comment was about. Hold on.
Okay, so
It's that to begin with, like when you began working out for the solution, can you show this is just me, can you show what variables you declared when writing your pseudocode, or did you even begin with one? It's kind of hard for me to visualize you solving the problem going straight into the function, if that makes any sense.
No, you're right. No, you're right. No, this is a longer problem to explain. I wanted to show because I know people are understanding what I'm saying. Why the function works is because of we're only using it to check, does it not have a letter or whatever. But if I'm just writing this from pseudocode, no, you're right. So I would start to, and functions I think need to be written this way in pseudocode. I think it's simplest to do it like this. I think I can't zoom in, but hopefully you guys can see. Define function param check. Maybe I'll change the name of that later or whatever. But here's the basic bones of how you do a function in pseudocode. Pass in. This is basically the function. Pass in a value, define what the code is doing, and then you pass out a value. Where's my out? Finish, blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, this was a return thing, but normally you put pass out, return value. If you're returning a string, you put return string. If you're returning a Boolean, you put return Boolean. But the basic idea is a function is like a box of code. And on one side, you have some holes. Those are the inputs. You define what they are. I'm either passing in a string, or maybe I'm passing in a string and then a number. Maybe I have 3 inputs, a string, number, and then another string. I get to decide what goes in. I also get to decide what's happening on the inside. Now, it's best to go line by line, the same way you would do with a regular program, and to say on each line, what step am I taking? What's happening? Well, in mine, I'm converting to lowercase. Now, if I want to be more descriptive and be like using dot to lowercase function, I can do that. And then I can also say create new alphabet. I can say create alphabet string, and then everything I can list everything that happened inside of the function as pseudocode, or I can just be like, basically check if the input lacks any letter of the alphabet. If I don't have time to go into detail, I can do that and then put pass out Boolean, because that's what I want to use. The function can be like this, or it can be more detailed and have every step for every line that's happening, just like we would any basic program where every line is a different thing that's being accomplished. But here is where I do my thinking. So it's important to do the pseudocode. So that's where I go, okay, I'm passing in a string, a number, or whatever. In this case, it's just a string. And then I go, what if I have uppercase or lowercase? Why don't I just force the string to lowercase and store the result in a new string. That's what my lowercase was all about, right? So hang on.
I'm sorry. I'm
So-
sorry. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, that verbiage that you're using is confusing to me because I mean, I understand what you're saying, but
All right, can I?
going back to like what we've been taught by Devon, like when you're writing your pseudocode, it's just not making sense to me. Like I don't know what you're doing, so it's actually kind of confusing.
Oh yeah, hang on one second. How do I get rid of this?
Passing and this forcing.
Press
Yeah,
the button.
TJ, how do you do that?
I don't know how I pressed the button on accident. I didn't mean to. I'm trying to get rid
That's
of it.
awesome. It's like podcasting.
Unshare and then
making.
share again. Maybe that. I mean, there's probably an actual way to change it, but that'll almost
Well, just
certainly
unshare
reset it.
and I'll.
Okay.
You're back.
It's still up.
All right,
It's still up for me.
TJ, I guess we have to give it. Well, we don't have to, but yeah. I guess Kelvin wants to go over critical thinking. But TJ, I guess closing remarks, if you would.
Oh yeah, Kelvin, do you want the screen? Go ahead. Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, Isel. And it's just, they didn't really say, oh, you have to say this or you have to say that necessarily, because pseudocode is not strictly code that has to be interpreted or anything. It's just a way to communicate what you want to do to other people who will decide, okay, I see they want to make a function, but I use C++. So the rules are a little different. So I'm going to go ahead. I know they want to make a function. I'm going to just do it my way. But all they needed was the basic idea, which is what you want to generally do in pseudocode. Yeah.
But they should give us a basic idea of the pseudocode, of how to write pseudocode. Like they should give us a basic idea of that.
The thing about it is it's kind of subjective, and it's not as long as it's understandable, but there's like no right way.
Right. When he was communicating that, I was not understanding, so I just felt that I needed to voice that. Here's my question.
I will point out we do have, however, like there's like the 10 principles of writing pseudocode that everyone should adhere to. However, outside of NetFCS and LT3, it's kind of like some people do it a little differently, and there's no rules that people have to adhere to. It's just good practice.
And you know what? That is something that I kind of been curious about. Like, when making those statements, as far as like, there's so many different solutions that you can come up to the same problem. Like, I want to actually see that. Like you showed us how you did yours. Like, I would actually like to see like the differences, because it matters, obviously, because there's so
It
many,
does.
there are so many different perspectives in approaching a problem and coming up with a solution that I think that, it would just be beneficial to actually see that in action.
You know what? That's a good point. I think my solution to that would be we need to drill on pseudocode, like specifically.
I think
So
Kelvin's
you
probably
guys-
going to be going over
Yeah.
what Yusel
Yeah,
was
he's
talking about.
All right.
the
He's gonna
issues.
do that, but just so you know, we can have a
So
session
I'm
where
I'm going to try
when-
to address something that people have a concern with and how to think critically and solve problems. So because we don't really have, too much time, and I was trying to see if I could find a good problem that we could tackle together. I couldn't find it in time. So we're going to go, and because we got this ticket recently, by now this ticket is essentially invalid. So we're looking
We're
at,
not cheating.
all right, for this year, create a function that will take a string as input. Now, what are the things that you're going to be looking for specifically when you're trying to manipulate a string? You want to go ahead and look for things that have to do with strings. That is immediately where your mind has to go to, is you look at a problem, you see what is it doing, what is it asking for? If it's manipulating a certain type of data, what are the things that I can do to that data? So right here, we know that we have strings. What do we know about strings? We know that strings have properties and they have methods. What are the methods of a string? So each of these, when you start looking at a string, it says you have character at, this is what it does. You have character code at, that's what that does. We have concat, that does another thing. Index of and last index of. So when you look at these and you start comparing them, you start thinking, can I apply this as part of my solution? Because one of the things that we know is we know that we have decision structures. That's our if else. We have switches, and then we have, in particular, we have stuff from like, our loops. If we need to do something over and over again, we need to look at loops. So is it going to be a while loop? Is it going to be a do while loop? Is it going to be a for loop? All of them loop, but we might structure it a little bit differently if we're using a different one. So the main caveat here is you want to build up tools in your belt so that when you're thinking about a problem, you think, what tool can I use to solve this? Because you have to break down the problem and see what exactly it is that you're trying to do. So when you're using IntelliJ, and let me pull up, I'm going to restream here in a second. We'll do a different project that I have. So when we look at specifically, any code that we're writing, there's different things that we can use for context. This is all, old tickets. None of these matter because we're moving on to like the next session. So if you look at here, when I hover over something, it tells me information. So number you know, it takes a value and it turns it into a number. Prompt provides a message, it takes a value, and it outputs a string. Like, we know those things because we've been doing it, but it's important to kind of like conceptualize this and use IntelliJ to help you write better code. Because the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to see errors. If there's errors, we want to go ahead and look at those errors when they come up. And if it's telling us that, something is missing, see, like I have 7 errors just from this one line. If I, quote it out, now we have 1. So that was all of the errors, is just, text that needed to be quoted out. So we look at this, there's going to be simple stuff that we know. And then sometimes we are going to have to research, methods. So what are methods? That is, when we do like, let string, right? We do a type string. When we set that to, a value, whatever it is, we do string dot, it comes up with all of these. So we know that we can use, for the pink, it is methods. The P, which is in purple, is a property. So the property of the string length returns a number. We know that because if we hover, it returns a number. This is how you're going to be able to use IntelliJ to teach yourself and fill the gaps in your knowledge. Because sometimes you're going to be trying to do something, and we did a lot with pseudocode, and that's logic, and some of us don't necessarily have a large understanding of computers to say, like, okay, well, how am I going to turn this problem into something that a computer can solve? But we're still going to have maybe some logic that we can work behind. And then it's just going to be like converting that into something that's workable, right? But me personally, I don't pseudocode. I go straight into the code because I'm looking at what I can do, in the language, because it might change, my logic. But, if you keep it simple on the pseudocode side, sometimes it's just like, well, I want to prompt for this, and then I want to maybe get this information, and I got to figure out how I'm going to do this, this thing that's going to be in the middle that's part of the story, and the story tells us a lot of information. So that's why I'm able to just go straight into the coding. But it's important to, use the tools and understand what it is that we're looking for when we're trying to research. So specifically, knowing that when you do the dot notation, those are properties and methods of the thing that you're using.
But we didn't go over that.
Yeah, we did. And that's why I'm telling you guys right now.
We did go over that.
Because
we did go over that.
In shadowing, they showed us maybe, this part where it's like,
when
use dot length or, maybe use prompt.
Okay.
They told us what those things are, But they didn't tell us like this is what it means.
Like
Um,
like how
How
it's
so
can we use
translated
it?
too. Like, yes, this means
yeah,
this, and that's what I was trying to say. Like when we had our retrospective with Roger, I believe it was. Was it
hmm
with Roger?
yeah, it was Roger at the
Right. It
retrospective.
was like, yes, I understand like that this means this, but then to actually put it into motion and action and produce whatever it's supposed to produce, like I just didn't make that connection.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to help bridge some of that gap because when we go ahead and like doing this hover here, you're going to see we have these links inside the hover. So you hover over like you know, some piece of code and then there's links. And then you can go and you know, if we do for dot length, it might be a little bit easier. So if we click on string here, which is a link inside of this, it takes us to a web page. And if you remember, Chris linked us one of these, the MDN web docs. This is mozilla.org, you know, developer. And this right here is just, it's like the manual, you know, and all of this is about different things that you can do with strings, everything that you'll want to like know about strings, properties, and this is like a technical manual. Now, you don't have to really read every single one of these, but you know, if you're trying to figure out why is something not working the way I want it to work, then you know, in the IT world, you know, there's just a lot of reading. So they have, you know, an acronym for that. I'm not going to say it, but it's you'll want to read up a little bit more. And there's going to probably be more like this is like the long form, you know, where it's going to put everything. But if you know what you're looking for, you can still find this, which tells you, you know, this is a list of things that you can do with strings, you know, how you can manipulate it. And, you know, the two lowercase, it's right here. So you think, okay, well, there's a problem where I want to make it simpler because every time I get an input from my user, I want it always to be lowercase, even if they put in some uppercase. Then you can go ahead and use two lowercase. If you're trying to compare, you know, when you see, you know, a character, then you immediately think of index of and last index of. So if and this is if the letter that you're looking for or character isn't in your string, it returns a -1. So you can think of that conceptually and be like, well, there's a problem I have where I want to check to see if there are any letter A's in my string. And so, you know, you would go string index of, and then the letter A, and since this is returning a number, we gotta, you know, put it somewhere because this right now isn't going anywhere. So let var1 equal, and then since we forgot to do this, let's do that real quick. So now it's actually a string type. And then we do var1.log because we want it to log to the console. And now we have this. So if I run this code, And presumably, let's quote out all the other stuff. When we run this in the console, it is going to show gotta wait for the React app. That is the worst part.
Maybe use Playground just so we can get faster.
Yeah.
I like to run things in Playground and then paste it into IntelliJ.
It's definitely good to do that if we're only dealing with like code snippets, but obviously once we start building more complex programs, you're going to want to do it in the file itself. Unless you're testing like just like the functionality of a single function, then, you know, Playground is really good for that.
I think you commented out everything. Kelvin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus, like when you run React, you only need to run it once, and then it just is always running for that project.
And do we know how to get to the console log here? For those who don't. Giselle?
Yeah, you do right-click inspect, and then you click on console in the tab, and the window pops up.
Can you show them how that would look like on TypeScript Playground, so they can compare the differences?
Yeah, so like right here, the same code snippet. We're just doing index of. It is at the first position. We know that, for a string, the index starts at 0. So when you do this, it returns 0. If we choose, W, then we get 9. If we do last index of.
Wait, hold on. Before you get to last index of, hopefully y'all don't mind, but I will start like Giselle, right? Because you do you know why it called out 9 for that problem? Can you go back to the code, Kelvin?
Yeah.
Yeah, without changing it. Do you know why? Okay, so he put in the string, you see how he put W, and then the output was 9, right? Do you know why it has 9?
Index start with the 0.
Wait, I'm asking Giselle though.
That was the
I apologize.
Because that was the eighth. Because that was the 8th letter in the parentheses of the string.
Right, but it's actually the 9th because remember it starts with 0, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Do you recall? Remember TJ was given that example with his? Right.
So this is technically the 10th position, but it returns 9.
Yeah.
So when you do...
So wait, which one is it? So if it starts from 0, right?
Yeah, you just plus 1.
Count from 0. So
A is 0?
Yeah, exactly. Now go ahead and count to W.
Then the W will be the 10th.
Right, but it's 9 because remember 0, right?
Yeah.
Make sense?
You start counting from 0.
Anything with an index, like arrays, and then we're treating a string with the index. Index is always 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, right?
I just wanted to clarify that before you move on. I don't want to.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just, add +1 when you're looking at, any of those where the position starts at 0. you just know that that's, the 10th position. So where this, would be important, right, is, last index of tells you where the last of that is. So if you're going to go ahead and compare, okay, I need to know if there's multiples of this, your problem solving might lead you to say, well, I know if the first is the last, then that's only one in the string. But if it's not, then maybe you have, a duplicate because the positions are different. And you can, you have to conceptualize those, but it's really like you want to look at these methods, look at the things that you can do with the data specifically. And then when you're looking at, why is this webpage doing that? When you're looking at the methods, you're going to see, what exactly, you want to, do with your problem. And then try to look at how you're going to manipulate the data. Because that's what you're programming for, is manipulating certain data types and, shuffling things around. So, today, because I wanted to see, how I can manipulate strings using match, I looked into match and all of the information for it. It's still way beyond, anything that I want to, be able to do right now. So I tabled it, and I'm going to probably look at other methods, but every time you learn how to use, one of these, things to manipulate, any of, the things in your code, that's adding another tool to your belt. The same thing with the arrays and how we used pop, push, and the splice. We're going to use those, and we're going to continue using them, but we might have other ways that we can implement that. We won't know until we have the problem, but the idea is, let's understand what these individual things do, and we're going to introduce maybe like one more thing, into our, tool belt as we move along. But if you're looking for a tool, you just need to, type into maybe Google, all right, I know I need to, work with strings. How do I, manipulate strings? What are string methods that I can use? And, that's just what I typed into Google here was, string methods in TypeScript. And that's what we got, was right here, strings, and it gave a list of the methods.
That was good. All right, we got 1 minute left, but I just wanted to. Oh, the video. Okay, one more thing. So like before we go, what Isel and Candace were saying about like being able to analyze problems and like come up with the solution and being able to write it in pseudocode. I think that we can actually get better on that. So what I can do is set up some sessions where I'll bring like a bunch of problems, like maybe 5 problems. And for each problem, we write down like, these are the solutions, or these are the methods that we're going to need. I know that for the stage gate, when I did the analysis, problem 1, it needed string manipulation. and comparison skills, right? Handling uppercase and lowercase, conditionals, and error handling, right? For each problem, when we read it, we need to be able to bullet point everything that we need to solve it. And then we need to test if our solution used all those or needed all those. And the repetition of doing that will make everyone better at it. So I'm pretty sure that all of us can get pretty good at that. It's just some of us haven't had enough practice at it yet, but we can do that.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone else got anything before we go?
No, just want to clarify for the audio out here, for anybody watching this that's not us, that this is what we do on our study group, aka Discord.
Yeah, and notice these are our own stories. See? So don't worry about using private information or anything. We will make new stories off of the stuff that we need just to make sure we have the skills.
This might have been a test, guys. You know, just saying.
Wait,
But,
what about all the times that we're like, here's all the answers to the test, and we just give them out to everyone? What about all those times?
Yeah, don't do that. Do the other thing. Yeah, we don't do that.
Stop it.
But absolutely,
Already stopped the recording.
Absolutely. Practice is how you're going to be able to do all of these things. So let's just make sure that we're practicing. Check the Discord. I'll be listing the times. I'll probably be on at 7 o'clock to drill problem analysis with Aaron. I may add another session earlier.
Hey, TJ, are you Eastern or Central?
Eastern.
Okay. So, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so 6. Okay. I'm
So-
gonna try. See, it's like
Let's-
8 o'clock for me. I'm Central. My kids go to sleep, and it's like I can then really focus on just getting
that'll
in.
be 11 for us, right? Where are you? Like 3
No,
hours?
stop it,
2?
Jose.
Wait, what?
You're in Florida too.
Right? Where are you at, Jose?
He sells in Florida.
Oh, okay, my bad. I thought that's why I was asking what time frame. Like, I think we're all in
No,
Florida. I
I'm
think
just
maybe one or two
Central.
people
It's
might
1:30 where I'm at. Panhandle.
be. Okay, yeah. Oh, it's 2:30 here. Yeah.
But yeah, listen, if you hop in a Discord and you see that nobody's around, that's okay. What you want to do is be like, I'm going to be working on problems from this time to this time. This is what time I'm able to work with. If people see that, then I may be like, okay, I can join you on that and help you drill you
All
with
right.
stuff. So, just say when you're going to be working on problems, because everyone needs to be making time to do this. It shouldn't matter if I'm available or anything. You need to make time to do this. Use ChatGPT to teach you. It is a teaching tool. It is fast. I know people got limited time. Don't waste time researching stuff. If you don't know how to research, ask ChatGPT how to do arrays, how to use functions with arrays, how to do stuff.
Nah, I just have to ask you, TJ.
All right.
You're basically
I'm-
ChatGPT.
I'm ChatGPT in
But-
human form. Don't tell anyone.
Also, TJ, I would say maybe obviously not this week, but maybe moving forward, I guess we can all come up with a day where for those who are having issues or want a little bit extra, help, just to be considerate to TJ's time as well. Maybe a day where we can all agree on, right? Even though TJ is in and out all the time, but just maybe a time frame where we can kind of all agree on that's beneficial to all of us, and a day where we can kind of do that, and then
A permanent day sounds good, but just know,
Yeah.
just don't assume people aren't going to help you, because whatever. Some people are up at 3 a.m. for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's me.
You know?
I'm
Yeah.
normally up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So that's what I was gonna
Having
say. If y'all
nightmares and
can kind of like,
everything.
maybe
Yeah.
record stuff, because that's how I have to go back. I go back over the stuff that's
so
recorded.
even last night, I saw that a meeting was on. I woke up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I overslept. It was like 2 a.m. and there was a meeting being recorded, and I just joined it. Don't know what that was about, but then I realized what time it was, and I was just like, no. But I do agree though with Jose and respecting each other's time. So maybe a poll or something as far as like a set, small, sweet, short time frame and day, and make that like be like, cohesive with everyone. I think will be helpful then, for us to be able to jump in and be a part of that.
honestly,
Yes.
I know that we do enjoy our long weekends and our Fridays, but I think Friday it being a day of the week still and not into somebody's weekend, that early on, not the whole day, right? Just an hour. It's all on TJ, honestly. I mean, not all on TJ, but
Well,
yeah.
yeah. Don't forget. There's Brian, there's Kelvin,
Right,
Jose.
right.
I mean, we're all good at something. So, and the idea is everyone helps everyone. If somebody
I do
helps
have a
you,
suggestion. Actually.
try to help everyone. Yeah, and
Sure.
one more thing before you get to that. Don't forget this. If you're struggling with something, also put it in their Slack because they want to know about it.
Right.
So, give them the information they're asking for, and then let them get to you whenever they have time. But whenever you're working on something, just hop into Discord. Somebody may see you and join you. Just do it. You don't really need to check with anyone. Just hop in there. If you're working for an hour on function, whatever, jump in the function channel. If I see you in there, I'll probably hop in, see if you need any help. A lot of people are willing to do that. Go ahead, Brent.
Yeah. So, in addition to TJ's, whatever it is that you're wanting to do, I guess like another sort of presentation to help us. I really think it would be beneficial because this is one thing that a lot of people are missing that would be super useful is some one-on-one, like practice problem solving, right? Like start from scratch. Like here is something we need to do. For instance, the pangram thing, right? We had something like that, and it's just someone who gets it and someone who needs help. Both of you work on that together, and the person who actually gets it coaches them through it. And like, this is why we do this step and so on and so forth. So that eventually, or essentially, you want the person who's having trouble to build it for you with you guiding them.
The same way we did kind of for database, essentially, with the pairings. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But this is specifically targeting, the people that need the help, right?
Sure.
That's the intention of it. So I'm available to do that. I mean, realistically, like anytime before 3:00 during the day, Friday. I just don't want to get like caught up with kids and stuff in the evening. But
sure.
But yeah, I'd totally be down to do 1 or 2 sessions like that, just helping you understand problem solving and why we use certain functions and stuff like that. I think one-on-one's the best environment for that.
Sure. Because we all sometimes have, even if 3 or 4 people don't understand it, those levels are somewhat different. And sometimes, Talesh might want to stop somewhere where Yazel might have gotten it, and then Yazel wants to stop somewhere where Candace might have gotten it, and so on and so forth. Or I'm just naming names. It's not in particular. Even myself, I may just link up with Kelvin or Brian to learn myself. So in general, I just feel like we got to respect each other's time, but then not expect too much from the institution, let's just say, either, right? We have to put it in our own time. We got to trust the process, and this isn't an overnight kind of thing. It's like any other muscle. You just got to give it persistence and time.
Yeah.
All right.
Take some practice.
By the way, TJ, I wasn't necessarily picking on you about the Chat GPT thing. It's definitely a useful resource.
How dare you?
You hear me?
It's my big brother.
Yeah. It's definitely a useful resource, but you don't want to become reliant. Like literally, you don't want to, because it may not always be there. Sure, it may be there, but in the event that you don't have access to it, you want to be able to do it on your own, to think through it on your own. So use it while it's here to help, but you need to develop that mental ability to start processing the problems and turning that into code. And that takes a lot of practice.
True. Practice is the main thing, but yeah, let it show you the first time. Ask it about things you don't understand, but the goal is to be able to write whatever you're doing from scratch on your own. So that's the goal where we want to end up. It's just that'll save you a lot of time getting started with understanding what you don't understand. So simply ask, understand, ask follow-ups, and then practice it until you got it with no errors.
Just to let you know, though, at 3:00 in the morning, 3 to 3:30 or so, Yeah, Chat GPT is like, hey, I have too many people on here. So you do have to end up learning how to do some of this stuff on your own.
That's when all the nerds are on there, 3:00 in the morning with their
Wow.
50th Monster Energy.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Nice.
So
Yeah, Mango Loco
yeah,
Monday
yeah.
hour.
Try it out at 3:00 in the morning when your child is asleep, and that's when you can get stuff done. Like,
Right.
Children
That's
asleep.
when
I
you
mean,
actually have
the,
some time.
the birds
Yeah.
aren't even chirping yet. What are you doing up there?
I need the world to be quiet in order to understand this coding. Like the entire world needs.
Like not in my nightmares, but while I'm awake.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna hop off, guys.
Y'all have a
Thank
good
you
one.
so much again.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.